and welcome to StoryDev. My name is Luke, also known as Tianery, and welcome to the 9th episode of Story Creator. This episode is really more of a cleanup and preparation for moving our player in a more turn-based fashion using the recently implemented calculation function we created last episode. Using our calculate available tiles, we can determine where to move our player to. To begin with, we return to our meditation state class to add whether or not our tiles have been calculated, setting its default value to false. The reason to do this is to prevent calculating available tiles every frame, giving us a performance boost which is vital for production quality gain. We are far from that at the moment. We test to see the results, and naturally everything still works as expected. Nothing has changed from the last time we tested the game, so we can move on. Next, I want to add walls into the grid. This is done by adding another condition in our grid loop. Our index variable is the value from our meditation grid value variable, as discussed in previous episodes, and this indicates whether the cell is empty or not. By checking for the value of 1, we say this is a wall, and this should be represented, at least for now, as a white cell. To test this, we need to set our grid manually. The reason we want to try this now is because we also want to check other things with our calculation function to make sure that it does not allow us to move to places we shouldn't be able to, because a wall is in the way, for example. Once we've set this all up, we launch the debugger and see the results. As you can see, we now have white squares in certain positions. We also see that we move the player. The cells we can move into is now more limited as a result of the walls in place. Let's exit and return to the code. What I'd now like to do is add more variables to our entities. We first add an move index, which we will need to allow for our entities to animate as they move to their next cell, as well as the variable is moving to check if the entity is moving or not. Back in our meditation class, we also add the variable player move to, which we will explain later. Using our new variable, we use this to check if this is not -1 and determine if it is currently our turn. This will allow us to draw another rectangle representing where we want to move to. Finally, we retrieve the X and Y positions for this location and draw the results on the screen. Returning to our rotate turn function, we want to find out if the next turn happens to be our player and set our player move to index accordingly. We should begin at the same index as our player first, and then allow the user to move later. Let's return to our processing events section within our render meditation function. In the previous episodes, we made it so that this loop iterates through our entities and performs the necessary movements or actions they need before the next turn. In the case of our player, we can now do some cutting down. We no longer need our player entity variable, as this will now be replaced with our new variable player move to. Before we continue, I did consider that the player move to variable should initially be set to the starting position of our player. Scrolling back down, we continue our cleanup. We remove the player input variable setting from all our up, down, left and right movements, and instead set this where the enter key is pressed. This basically produces a confirmation for the game to continue the loop between turns. Next, we return to our movement checks. We replace the player entity.index assignments with the player move to variable, and as you will see, we can simplify our available tiles check even further. When we hit return, we also want to make sure that our player entity instance is set to the new index we want to move to. We go in and test the results. We realize at this point that we are not checking for whether or not the cell is empty, so returning to our code, we check the index matches. After some time, I realize the check does not evaluate to null, so this is corrected, and when we return to the game, we see the results we expect to see. Finally, we add one more check so we can at least move over our player entity that is on screen. It does not make sense to only allow for us to move in one direction. And that will be it for this video. If you like this video, please consider hitting the thumbs up, and if you are interested in following the progress of this game, hit the subscribe button along with the bell notification and get updates when I update. So, just so you know, I am also working on a novel. That novel is going by the same name as this game, Shadowlight. If you are interested, Volume 1 is going through editing, but it is close to completion. Keep an eye open, because the release of the first volume of Shadowlight is imminent. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.